you are. Okay, so we're talking about stress and exam stress and dealing with that, right?
Yeah,
So so I'll just let you introduce yourself, Dan, and just say what it's about and go from there.
cool. So yeah, my name's Daniel, and I'm currently a third year student, and I'm currently in France doing my Erasmus year. So that's sort of an international year out. And so I've been studying physics, which is my degree in French, which has been intense. But yeah, so my background is really I sort of GCSEs, A levels, then sort of straight to university. But I've been sort of around this sort of general sort of understanding for several years now since the start of university. And really the shift I've seen has been sort of incredible, and most notably around sort of exam and university, but really sort of all areas of work, my attitude towards it has completely changed. And it's good because I've had a very much sort of before and after picture. So before sort of A levels is when I was really struggling. My A level exams, like I had a lot of, sort of stress, and it was quite difficult to sort of maintain that. Whereas jumping straight into university, I was obviously, you don't lose that sort of pressure that you feel, but it was a complete different relationship with it. I no longer was scared of feeling it. For me, I was almost sort of anticipating it and actually kind of like, okay, no, I see it as being, so I see this sort of, I don't even want to call it stress anymore. I want to call it sort of a pressure. I want to see this pressure as something to really get me to sort of work hard, and something that's sort of almost a bit exciting, this sort of adrenaline rush that you get. So I've changed my relationship to it as being a purely negative thing to something which I can actually draw a positive out of. And that sort of so paradigm shift has been really, really powerful for me and powerful for my studies. So I'd say during my actually no, almost sort of primary school, secondary school time, I had lots of going on at home, and I was incredibly sort of anxious, and that really reflected in my studies. Because if your brain is completely full up with all these sort of feelings and thoughts about sort of anxiety, things that I know you're maybe not getting on with your friends, if you don't have a good friendship group, there's things with family, all that stuff creates this sort of storm inside your head, and it's impossible to actually do well in school because you can't fill up a glass which is already full. So then during secondary school, I was similar. I had a sort of stronger group of friends, and that sort of helped sort of confidence, and it was a lot easier. But then sort of with sixth form, I kind of crashed back down into that sort of framework of thinking. And it was my mum who introduced me to kind of this sort of side of coaching. And when in university, for me, it was the idea that actually exams didn't have to equal stress. Like, I'd always been taught in a way that this exams in university or work in general would always cause you to be sort of anxious, and that it was an inevitable thing. And I always sort of just accepted that because I saw people around me, my friends, who were being stressed about it. And it's often we have this conversation where people say, oh, I'm really anxious about the exam, I don't think I'm going to do well. And then all the group of friends say, oh my God, me too. This is awful. We're all going to fail. We're all going to die. And then suddenly you go from something which is like kind of stressful to like, whoa, like apocalypse. And this is this cycle that goes around, which is now that I feel I'm more out of it, it's quite sort of funny. But we have this relationship where actually it's almost in a sort of masochistic way, we enjoy it, or we enjoy the community that it brings, because that's something it's sort of common for everyone. So people bond over anxiety and stress, I think, and not in a deliberate way, not in something that people choose to do, but it's just something that's sort of inevitable, especially within the student community. So I was able to sort of break out of this, and it was really my understanding that actually external things, external circumstances don't necessarily have to reflect our own internal well-being. So there's often this sort of correlation where something goes on outside, say one of your friends is sort of a bit mean to you or something, and then suddenly you have this sort of whirlwind of thinking, okay, so what did that mean? If they don't like me, then then I feel like that brings my value down a lot, or I feel really pissed off at them. Whereas actually, if they say something which you don't particularly like, then it's just a conversation. Like, it's just something that's going on. Like, you're the one that's inferring the meaning on it, even though it seems very apparent. You're still the one actually bringing that meaning. You're projecting it, because that conversation doesn't have really any sort of intrinsic meaning at all. So it's the exact same thing with exams and your work. It may seem that actually all your work is causing you to feel this certain way. I do an exam which is really horrible. I come out and I want to cry and I want to sort of run away, because if I did badly in the exam, it means I'm not hardworking. It means I'm not studious enough. It means that I'm just not clever. And then we're putting all that stuff onto it. Like, we're kind of abusing ourselves, even if it's not deliberate at all. Whereas in real life, the exam is just a sheet of paper, A4 sheet of paper that has a grade on it. Sure, the meaning of that, say the implications could be, say if you don't do well in an exam, you have to retake it. But in 50 years down the line, it's not going to be the death of you. You're not going to suddenly sort of keel over and pass out. I mean, depending how bad the exam was, but you're going to survive. And if you see that that meaning that you put onto it, the stress of it, the stress of failing, the stress of not getting above a certain sort of grade, that number is still just a number. And often we get stressed about being stressed as well. We want to sort of run away from it, because sure, feeling stressed and feeling in that way it doesn't feel great at all. And there's so many times, especially this year, my Erasmus, that I felt like that, just being completely overwhelmed. However, I think one of the small things that changed is actually I'm more welcoming to this whole range of human emotion, from the very good side to the feelings of stress and anxiety, all the way to sort of the worst scale, because human emotions are all beautiful. Like, there's no such thing as a good emotion or a bad emotion. Sure, we want to sort of generally push towards the good scale because that's what we enjoy feeling. But actually, in order to feel that, we have to feel everything. You can't, and it's impossible to run away from emotions. They're always going to be with us for your entire life. And the only thing that we can alter, and this is something that occurs over a time, is our relationship with our emotions. Whether we want to kind of drown them in by doing things such as I don't know, drinking. Often, say after like bad exams, a lot of people, my friends, have like that they sort of drink because they want to stop feeling like that, or whether it's sort of other behaviors which maybe aren't so sort of harmful, or stuff which is very harmful. And I think that once we are less scared of our emotions, then for me that's a positive thing. And then for me that's what's happened, and I'm really so grateful for that. Yeah, so exams is one of the really interesting things with sort of youth, that we're put under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of work, and a lot of teachers. I remember seeing one post, I can't remember where I saw it, where there's an email from a teacher or a group of teachers to a group of parents, and they said that yeah, exams are always going to be inherently stressful for this, so these are some ways to kind of help yourself. And I see that's kind of being quite sort of damaging in a way, because it's a teacher who's has some sort of authority. It's saying that actually, yes, no, you're right, you're always going to feel stressed for exams, whereas that causality doesn't always have to be there. And then again, it's pressure I see as being something different. Pressure, you feel like there's a sort of fire under your ass, you need to sort of get moving, that's your body's telling you to kind of, like, your adrenaline's going a little bit, but it's more of a positive thing. So yeah, I definitely think that people need to be also introduced to the idea that it doesn't have to always be like this. There is sort of alternatives out there. But what's been interesting this year actually with my Erasmus is, so first year and second year, my relationships with exams, that they were quite positive in a way. I was feeling less anxious. Whereas when I came to my sort of third year, and obviously all my exams being in French and all my studyings being French, like I suddenly thought, oh my God, what have I done? Like, this is awful. And a lot of those feelings actually kept sort of coming back up, almost feeling like this sort of big wave coming over you. And the idea of that, before, when I had an exam, I would know that I'd come out of it at the end, and then I would be okay, I'd be alive, and there's still that sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Not in the morbid way, not like light at the end of the tunnel, sort of you're going to die. But there is going to be it's just a cloud which is passing over. But when I was in France, I was thinking, oh God, I can't see my way out of this. And it was my first term that I was really struggling with it. But it was, I don't know what switched, but after a while, I started to actually think that, okay, if I'm going to do badly in this exam, then there's nothing I can do now. I can work my socks off and I can do as hard as I can, but physically there's not really much I can do. And I just had to let go. And that thought in my head at the time, I was just like, well, that thought can piss off. Like, obviously I need to try like harder at this, or I need to, next time I need to do all this extra stuff. I need to start waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go to sleep at 4 a.m. And but really there's nothing else you can do. And in the grand scheme of things, sure, like your plans might change. So I've had this big fear recently that, so I'm planning to do a master's afterwards. So it's a 4-year course. And I've been having this really bad fear that they're going to look at my grades this year and say, sorry, you can't do a master's anymore. And I've been wanting to do this course since GCSE really. And I knew that this was going to be my path, sort of do a physics degree, do a master's, and then whatever else I'm going to do afterwards. So, and it's really hard to actually imagine any other route for yourself once you're happy with this sort of course that you plan out for yourself. And it's incredibly difficult, and it can be so heartbreaking at times, because you think, all this work I've put into this, is it for nothing? Does it mean I'm not good enough for this? Does it mean that other people are better than me? This sort of competition that you have. Whereas it means none of that at all. Like, like I said at the beginning, like we're the people putting those emotions onto the things. Objectively, sure, if I'm not able to do masters, then that will really suck. But it means that there's another path there for me. And right now I might not be able to see it, but again, in 50 years time, I'm sure actually I'll look back and I won't be able to see another way. Because the way that we sort of envision the future is that we have almost this sort of singular path that we have for ourselves, and any deviation from it is a failure. Whereas the whole concept of failure and success, on a human level, doesn't exist. It's all made up. Sure, you can fail and pass an exam, but that doesn't mean that you're failing. And it doesn't mean that you're also, if you pass an exam, doesn't necessarily mean that you're passing. It could be a complete fluke. So we need to somehow break this sort of binary of we're doing well, we're not doing well, because there's so much that we can do. Like everyone has so much potential, and you see so many young people who are so disillusioned with the university system, with education in general, because the system that we grade ourselves with is inherently flawed, because it is based on this binary of you're failing, you're succeeding, whereas actually we need to really push past that and actually realize that everyone has a huge potential and everyone is completely different. And then I think by doing that, a lot of the stress will automatically be gone, because people won't be stressed about succeeding or failing, because they realize that actually that's not a true way. That is not it doesn't exist, essentially. And I think that's quite powerful. It's quite sort of profound, I think, and I think that there's a lot of progress to be done, but when it comes to sort of the next couple of years and young people's mentality to exams and revision to us, I think there really does need to be a paradigm shift. Tragically, I saw at my university, so my University of Bristol, which is my home university, there was someone who passed away, a young student, because they had been kicked out of their course, and the amount of pressure that they had, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And the fact that at a lot of university, the pastoral support isn't necessarily there for everyone. There are a lot of holes that people fall through. And I think that if we can, especially as groups of friends, if we can start changing our mentality about work and about stress, so rather than it being this sort of circular, the circle of I feel stressed, like, oh yeah, me too, and then I'm feeling like worse and worse and worse. If we can break that, so the conversation, right, it turns to like someone saying, oh, I'm very stressed about this exam, then you say, so what are you sort of like, what are you stressed about? Like, how are you feeling? Kind of like, how can I help? Like, should we do something to kind of take your mind off it? So it changes your relationship with, so it's not something that kind of keeps on escalating. And then on a more personal level, if you're able to see yourself as trying to remove those, you can't say remove because that sounds like an active choice, because it's not. And I'm very aware that this isn't a choice at all, because we have no choice over our feelings and thoughts. They, just like the weather, they pass through us. And saying to change our thoughts is like trying to change the weather. But it's realizing that actually behind all those thoughts is your well-being, and is your place that will always be there for you, and almost having some faith in yourself that no matter what happens, intrinsically you'll be okay. No, nothing can take that away from you. No exam, no person, no event. That's that place within you where you're feeling kind of tranquil, your home, your kind of idea of self, like that is intrinsic to you. And I feel that a lot of students, especially me when I was younger, when people said to me that, like teachers, they said like, you weren't sort of bright enough, or you were doing really badly in this, we feel that taints us. We feel that this is changing my identity. My identity is now that I'm not smart, or my identity is that I'm not going to amount to anything. I'm not going to compare to my siblings. Whereas nothing can touch that from us. Like we're the masters of our own fate. And no matter kind of what shit is held at us, we all have the potential to come out the other end and see the bigger picture in a way, and see our own well-being, and see that it is still intact. I think that, so this relationship of how we see our own sort of identity, well-being, is really fundamental to our relationship with sort of exams and stress. I think all young people need to be shown this. So I found out I found out kind of quite early on, but I know for a lot of people, this is just the way of living. So I do really think that there's a lot of work to be done. So yeah, those are kind of my sort of my thoughts about it. If you have any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And that's what you said, is that's exactly what the Secret of Everything live event is all about, is about sharing it with more and more young people as much as we can. So thank you so much for coming and talking about your experience, because that makes a huge difference. And we have got a few people watching, so if there's anyone who has questions, you can just type them into the chat box. You can type in questions while I'm. So, Daniel, what let me just get clear for people. What you said was it's the thoughts that are going through your mind that are producing the feelings, the stress in your body, right? So it's and actually, when you think about it, there are people, if you notice amongst your friends, I mean, although everybody says, oh yes, I'm stressed, there are some people who get through exams with no stress at all. And they're, and so something must be happening, because it can't be the exam that's causing the stress if some people are getting through it without any.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We all know that one person who is totally sort of chilled out for an exam and then they do really well. We all hate that person. But that is totally true. Everyone goes to an exam, and there's some people who are absolutely fine and some people who really not. And I've been on both sort of ends of that. And it's the same exam. It's the same sort of environment, but it's our thoughts about it which are completely different.
Yeah.
And that causes those feelings.
And so the second thing that I'm interested in, you said you have these thoughts and they cause the feelings, but you can't change the thoughts, right? So some people might be thinking, well, if you can't change the thoughts, how does that help, right?
Yeah. So sorry.
No, you go on.
Yes, I was going to say, I think so. Before, when a lot of people say, like, when I'm feeling stressed, I do these sort of activities to clear my mind. So that's sort of a traditional way sort of looking at it, in terms of like I'm forcing sort of new sort of feelings and thoughts into my brain to kind of cover the anxious ones I'm feeling. However, I think what the most sort of powerful tool was for me is just the fact of knowing that it can pass. And we know this from day to day. We're feeling one moment sort of on cloud nine, we're feeling really relaxed and peaceful, and suddenly something drops inside of our stomach, and then we're feeling terrible, and we don't know why, but we just suddenly have this dramatic shift. Or it could be the other way around, where we're feeling really moody, and then suddenly something happens. You look at it's like a blue sky outside, and then you're like, oh, I feel good. So we're so kind of temperamental with our own thoughts, but we see it happen so often, where we have these sort of changes, like drastic changes, and but then we often forget it as soon as something really terrible happens, or even something that kind of very, very good happens. We forget that our state of mind can sort of like swing. I think when we get into the sort of exam periods, or if you've got a lot of work, we often forget that we do have the ability to actually come out the other side. Because throughout your life, the amount of emotions that you feel is sort of uncountable. So it's, even though in the moment we feel like this is how we're going to feel for the rest of our life, it's like when we have a cold and we're sitting in bed and we think we're feeling miserable, we think that we're going to be ill for the rest of our life, or we feel it, but then you think logically, like, no, of course that's good, that's stupid, like, of course we're going to recover at some point. The difficulty with mental health is because that's invisible, and we often, and it's such a more understudied thing, that we don't have that confidence within ourselves that we can come out the other side. I don't want to say heal, because that implies that we're broken, but maybe if we have that sort of confidence, or that faith in ourselves, of our own well-being, so I think that's quite a powerful tool for me, just knowing that sort of intrinsically, and that's something that takes time. There's no 3 steps to suddenly feeling no anxiety, because it's those feelings will be inevitable. It's just depending on the scale, and how much, also how much you can believe them in a way, because it's
one of the things that it just reminded me of a conversation I was having earlier about how interesting it is that when we go to the cinema, we go, or we watch a film on television or somewhere, on wherever.
Yeah.
We very often we watch scary films to feel scared, right? And we enjoy feeling scared. We really enjoy feeling scared. We pay money to go and feel scared, right? And yet, when we get scared, when we get scary feelings about exams, we think we shouldn't be feeling it. We don't just enjoy it. You know, you could just enjoy it the same as you do, which is what you were saying that you were doing. You weren't just waiting for it to go away. You were actually, okay, so I've got this, what did you call it? Pressure.
Yeah, pressure.
So I'm experiencing pressure now. That's a human experience. I'm experiencing it. I don't have to change it. I don't have to, it doesn't have to be something different. And it's only when we think we shouldn't be feeling that way that we start to suffer.
I think it's the idea of having control as well. So, for example, with a film, we know what we're getting into. We're kind of controlling that in a way. We're controlling about what we're going to experience. I think when it's out of our control. So, when with an exam, which is something which is definitely going to come up and we can't avoid, we don't like that feeling. So, it's trying to sort of give up that control in a way, and trying to sort of accept it for what it is.
Yeah, that's a bit like saying I want to control whether I breathe or not, you know.
Yeah, or it's trying to control something that is completely out of your control. And again, like if you start trying to control your emotions or control feeling anxious, then you're going to numb everything else. You can't selectively numb emotions. So it's really, really difficult sort of saying this, especially whilst you're in a place of not feeling stressed, because once you're in that place, it feels like you're at the sort of the eye of the storm. You can't see out. But it's you will at some point. Like and all, like I'm a firm believer that all emotions are equal. Like we have to our relationship with them should all be sort of equal. So when we're feeling happy, some of us, we know that at some point we're going to sort of feel sad again. And I think when we're feeling sad, it's not always obvious that we're going to feel happy. So it's this sort of interesting kind of imbalance that we have. It's interesting when you go back to talk about sort of films and or storytelling in a way. Like we are the most convincing storytellers ourselves, because all this of emotions and thoughts we have, in the very most kind of loose of a word, they are stories. They're not stories that we kind of purposely tell ourselves or that we kind of control, but it's our mind, it's our brain, it's communicating with ourselves. But yet at its core, they are intangible things. They are these objects you can't sort of like, you can't put one on the table, you can't put a thought on the table, you can't sort of physically hold it. We know it's there because we feel it, and they're the strongest things that we can feel. But again, they're the most sort of convincing illusion that there is. At its core, and this is kind of a bit controversial, but fundamentally they don't exist externally to us. And I think that is a bit of a sort of mind. I don't want to swear too much, but I'm kind of a bit of a mind fuck, because it's something that we've never been taught. But yet actually it's quite sort of a simple idea, and it is incredibly powerful. So those feelings of those stories of stress that we tell ourselves, that we almost embody them. So I like this quote where it's saying, we are not our circumstances. So if I'm feeling stressful or I'm feeling stressed, doesn't mean I am stressed. I think there's a really big difference between that. Everyone has feelings of feeling stressed, feeling anxious at some point in their life. But there's a difference between saying that you are feeling these thoughts, these stressed thoughts, these anxious thoughts, but that is not my identity. I am not stressed. You can't be a single emotion. That's like saying, like going back to the weather analogy, like the earth is cloudy. Like, no, it sort of comes and goes. Just because you're in the UK and it's pretty much cloudy all the time doesn't mean that the UK is cloudy. It's transient. And I think that's quite an important word as well, actually, the idea of transiency. Is that a word? Not sure. But things being transient. There we go. And I think that's a powerful idea to sort of accept, and it's something which is very difficult to, because again, we're convincing ourselves of these thoughts and emotions, of these thoughts of stress, and we don't. It's almost like those thoughts of stress don't want us to realize that at any moments they could sort of disappear into thin air.
So when you first heard about this way of understanding that thoughts were causing your emotions and your feelings and so on, did you find that hard yourself? Did it take you a long time to get that?
In a way, yes and no. I don't want to go into it too much, but my background is in physics and in science, and there's something which is very very appealing to me for this kind of like understanding, because so very simply, the laws of physics aren't good or bad. They aren't that they don't cause emotion intrinsically, and if everything in the universe is based off those sort of principles, laws, then how can anything, any event, any sort of anything out there external to us have those good or bad emotions? Therefore, the only thing responsible for those feelings is ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that was quite kind of apparent in a way, and I think I'm quite lucky in that sense. But there are definitely moments where, quite big moments, where I felt myself going back into those sort of thought storms. Yeah. And it's like the way I kind of get out of it in a way is, here's a question. So what's the best way of settling a snow globe? So doing nothing. You can't sort of shake it a certain way to sort of get everything to settle. You have to just sort of leave it be. And sometimes that's what we need to do to ourselves. And some people find that sort of feeling of stillness through sort of yoga, exercise, meditation. But I think at its core is the idea of trying not to aggravate it too much. It's not trying to force yourself to stop feeling this way. And it's really difficult because it's such a horrible feeling that you feel when you're anxious, and we're so desperate to get out of it. It's almost like really random example, but if anyone's seen Harry Potter, the first one, where they're dropped into that sort of big vat of this sort of vines or something, and the only way they can get out of it is being still, and that they sort of drop through. And bit of a random analogy, but that's how I see it in a way. Sometimes we need to try and come face to face with it, face to face with those feelings, and not fight them as much, because again, they are part of us.
Yeah,
we can't get away from that.
Actually, that's really good. I love that one.
I just thought of it. Yeah, I just thought of it now, but yeah, no,
well, that's exactly it. That it just comes to you, right? That you weren't looking for that. That's where wisdom comes in. Is we all have access to that, like that power that makes us breathe, and that's where we get our ideas from, and that's where our who we really are shows through. You know, we all get stuff out of the blue, just like you got that Harry Potter idea. It just comes out of the blue, right?
Yeah.
And there's always something there to tell us this is what to do next.
Yeah, essentially. And we like to get kind of in the middle of that sometimes. I think it is sort of being out of control, because we can't control those sort of moments of inspiration or those moments of clarity. And letting go of the wheel and trusting yourself in that way is a really sort of massive step. And no one can do it perfectly through their life. That's impossible. No one has that kind of perfection. I mean, the whole idea of perfection is completely made up anyway. So it's being okay with those I'm not going to say flaws, because that implies something negative, but these sort of components of ourselves, these tendencies that we have, sort of anxious tendencies, like tendencies where we get really angry. These things, they're all natural.
normal human tendencies.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a one big human experience.
Yeah.
And that is intrinsically neutral.
Yeah.
And because we're the people that make up what's happy and what's sad, what's good and what's bad. We're the creators of those ideas, those concepts.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally at its core, humans are neutral. Like everything in the universe is neutral. And this is when you starting to get to the really existential crisis part, which I've had a few times actually. I've just laid on my bed on my back, and then I was just looking at my ceiling and being like, "What the hell? Like this means that nothing has any meaning. This is, oh my god." But after you get over that, it's quite nice. It's quite freeing. It means that you can't make mistakes.
Yeah, and that's great, isn't it? That it's not possible to make mistakes. That's what we were talking about before we came on here, is that it can't go wrong. There's nothing can go wrong.
Mistakes is only from one reference frame, from one sort of relative standpoint. You look at a mistake in the future, and actually that could be the best decision you've ever made.
Mm-hmm.
So we change our angle on the decisions that we make, or whatever happens in our life. So like, for example, stuff that's happened to me when I was younger was sort of family-wise and stuff which I thought would be completely sort of unhinging for me. I wouldn't change because it's made me who I am. And despite how horrific it could have been to me, and how much maybe back then I wish I could have gone back and changed it all, but now I wouldn't have seen it any other way, because we can only know our present and our past. We can't look into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And those things that happened in the past, we can't change those. And these past events aren't good or bad. They are what they are. So if we do, say, going back to the exams example, like if I really mess up an exam, it's happened in the past, and I physically can't, no matter what I do, I can't go back and change that. And I think having that kind of letting go of it is really difficult, but it's possible. But yeah, it does change your perspective on things.
Certainly does. Yeah, it certainly does. Right. Well, thank you very much. That's really great. There don't seem to be any questions so far.
Okay.
And that's fine. But this is part of the Secret of Everything live event, which is going on the whole of May and the whole of June. And if you go to the Secret, if anyone has got questions, or they want to know more, or they want any help, then go to thesecretofeverything.com and you'll be able to find links, and there will be lots more talks like this. And thanks so much, Daniel. In fact, Daniel will be back later.
Yeah, on the 22nd of May, I've got another thing sort of lined up where I go more into sort of my sort of stance of this, into the sort of sciencey part, but also so I'm part of the LGBT plus community. I'm sort of seeing how this is so relevant for LGBT plus people. So that's what I'll be talking about on the 22nd.
Brilliant, thanks. There's a message from Yolanda who says she's loving this. And by the way, yes, transience is a word.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so I think we'll leave it at that for today. That's the only question that we've had so far, but people can post questions on YouTube or on the website. They can email us and they will get answers. So yeah, and Daniel will be back to answer them later.
Yes, I will. Well, thank you very much for.
Thank you very much. That's lovely.
Great.
See you later.
See ya.